Hello and welcome to Policy Bazaar. I'm Arjun Bhagat. Now, it is that time of the year when we start planning for the much-awaited winter and Christmas vacations. We take due precautions while booking our flight tickets, accommodation and tour packages. But are we prepared against unforeseen situations or emergencies such as accidents, flight delays, lost baggage, theft or even hospitalization? Now, do we plan for it as dedicatedly as we do for other aspects of traveling? Incidentally, the most important factor that we tend to ignore while planning our vacation is travel insurance, unless, of course, it's mandatory to opt for that cover. Now, if you're planning a vacation, it is imperative that you opt for a comprehensive coverage. And today we'll be discussing this in all its manifestations. And with us is Yashish Dhaya, the CEO and founder of Policy Bazaar. Welcome to the show, Yashish. Now, tell me, how important is travel insurance? Apart from, just going there and saying, it is kind of a requirement, so I'll get this basic cover.
Yeah. So I think, the compulsory travel insurance is only in Europe. Besides that, it's not really compulsory anywhere else. But as people have traveled, some people have had sickness. My grandfather, I've given that example a few times on this show. He was sick for about 4 hours. The bill was more than $10,000. There was, sometimes things get lost. I have lost my passport and a lot of documents in Switzerland once, safest of countries, along with, camera, computers. So things do get lost. Baggage gets lost. All of this is covered by travel insurance at a very, very small cost. So why wouldn't one take it? I think the compulsory part is only in Europe, and Europe has done it because Europe actually is the only part of the world which has a lot of state welfare. So what that means is, if you fall sick in Europe, basically the state used to pay for it. So you could go to Europe, fall sick, be in the UK, be in the NHS, and the NHS is not going to give you a bill for it. And because of that, they insist that people have travel insurance, because if they don't have travel insurance, then that bill just falls on the government. That, unfortunately, is not the situation anywhere else in the world. So if you go to Zambia, for example, there is no state healthcare system which is going to take care of you. If you go to the US, you're going to pay your own bills. So, if you're willing to pay your own bills, and if people just think for a second, don't you usually whenever you're traveling, doesn't it mostly happen that something or the other goes wrong in almost any travel? Even if it is like, as simple as traveling 4 or 5 hours and coming back, food changes, your sleep patterns change, the climate changes, and of course, it's a bit more different from your usual routine. So the chances of falling sick are usually higher on travel. And on top of that, the chances of just think about the past 10 travels that you've made or the past 5 travels. Was there not something that you lost? I recently lost a phone. I left it on top of the car, started driving the car, and obviously I realized, because you're kind of excited, there are children, there's something else going on, something will get lost. It's not possible that you'll be everybody in the family will be so careful that nothing is lost ever. So the chances of losing stuff are higher, the chances of falling sick are higher.
So how does one actually plan for that in terms of an individual? Suppose you're going out with a family. How do you decide what is the kind of coverage I need? Do you get a higher proportion of coverage, or do you add on, say, a health component to that, depending on if your parents are going with you, they're going to be older? How does this whole thing work?
Yeah. So see, a travel insurance is largely a health insurance policy.
Precise.
So health insurance is always there in the travel insurance. Whenever you buy travel insurance, 80 to 90% of the cost is going towards health insurance, because it's basically going to cover all kinds of health exigencies.
And it's usually clearly spelled out. It's worth $100,000 or $500,000.
Yeah. How much cover is actually spelled out. The minimum is about $50,000. Now, it totally depends on where you're traveling. If you're traveling to India, $50,000 is a lot of money. If you're traveling to the US, no, it is not. Any serious sickness, within 3 days, $50,000 is gone. So I know cases where there have been bills of $200,000. So first thing you decide is where you're traveling. And usually the places are to be demarcated into 4 broad categories. One is US and Canada. The second is the entire European Union area. The third is Japan, Australia. The fourth is sort of Asia. And the fifth is anywhere else in the world. So these 5 regions.
The broad
differentiation of these 5 regions. Bases these 5 regions, once you decide which of these 5 regions you're going to, for the duration that you have, for the people that are going, you are going to get a quote. And you just pay for the quote and you get the policy. Now, in the policy, you have to basically make sure how much cover do you wish. Do you want $50,000? I would suggest to anybody going to the US to maybe have $500,000 of cover. Now, the $500,000 cover does not cost 10 times the 50,000 rupee cover. It probably costs about 1.5 to 2 times. So it helps a lot to have a higher cover than to kind of, pay for it later. The second thing one has to see is what are the pieces that are excluded in this. So usually, and India being a place where pre-existing diseases are very common. So, beyond 40, a lot of people in the country have got something or the other, whether it's diabetes or whether it's a heart condition or whether it's something else. And so any kind of non-life-threatening hospitalization for any of these is many times not covered. And that is something called a pre-existing disease cover. So some companies have it, some companies do not have it. So there are 3 conditions that can be there in pre-existing diseases. One is never covered, second is covered only in emergency, and third is always covered, right? If I were somebody who had a pre-existing disease, I would go for the always covered. It just makes sense. It is a little more expensive. It'll probably be about 30% more expensive. But you know what you're talking? You're talking about a cost on a travel piece of maybe about 50 rupees to 60 rupees per day. So the extra might cost you 10 rupees per day more. Now, come on. When you're buying your tickets, so overall travel insurance will come to about 4% of the cost of your travel. Whatever your travel is, whether, including your flights, hotels, that's a broad rule of thumb that, I have learned over the years looking at. Your travel insurance will typically, if you've got a 1 lakh rupee travel booked, you will typically spend about 4,000 rupees on the travel insurance. And it's definitely worth doing it. It protects your travel. Now, that's not the only thing it protects. It also protects you from missed flights. It protects you from, any kind of changes that can happen in your schedule because of which you start missing flights or the entire trip gets cancelled. All those things, travel insurance protects you against.
Right. And what about for senior citizens and for students? We see a lot of students going abroad. Yeah. So does it make sense for them to buy insurance in India? You'll be buying it in rupees. Yeah. It's probably going to be cheaper. How does that work?
Yeah. So purchasing travel insurance, there are 2 ways in which students can purchase it. They can purchase it from the university or they can purchase it here. Now, there's a rule of thumb in insurance. Whenever you are buying through a locked arrangement, so there's a university which has got one insurance company giving it the policies, and you are all forced to purchase that policy. That insurance policy will always be more expensive. That's, mostly be more expensive. That's just a rule of thumb. It is like, honestly, if you're taking a car, the car dealer will usually charge you a little extra than, you can get from the open market. Because you are there's a bit of, linkage. The same thing is with the university. So you will pay about 1/3 to half if you purchase your policy from India before you travel. However, you must ask your university what are the conditions that they want in that travel insurance, because universities and insurance companies out there have been getting smart. So what they do is they try to put 1 or 2 conditions which are not covered by the Indian insurance policy, just to make sure that you purchase their policy, not this one, because they obviously want sales, right? So you ask them that and check around in India whether those conditions are covered. So most of the Indian companies have now started covering those conditions also. And you will save about 50% before you travel. Now, a travel insurance policy can be bought for a period up to 2 years. Now, as far as senior citizens are concerned, senior and very senior citizens are concerned, the good news is travel insurance is available now. And again, with that, clauses around pre-existing diseases become very important. But of course, you must purchase them. I would reckon 1 in 4 senior citizens who travels does fall sick during that duration of travel. And the cost of the travel is very high if you did not have travel insurance. And I don't need to tell the people who are traveling to Schengen because you can't travel because you have to buy it for the visa. But even for you, do not buy the basic cover of $50,000 or something. Try to get a little more cover. Now there are two more pieces. You could buy travel insurance for single trips, or you could buy travel insurance for the whole year. So you have to kind of think about what you want to do there.
So what makes more sense? So if one is traveling multiple times, so do you keep buying individual policies or do you actually go buy a multiple trip policy? How does that work, Yashish?
So the rule of thumb is if you're going to travel as the same group, perhaps to similar location for more than twice, then it makes sense to buy an annual plan. Because the annual plan is usually about double the price of and plus it saves the hassle, etc. So buying an annual plan sometimes makes sense if you're going to make more than 2 travels. So for example, I make more than 2 travels abroad, so I buy an annual plan. But if I was making a single plan, suppose I'm going to one country, I'm not going to go there again, then a single plan obviously makes sense. It's as simple as that.
We see a lot of families traveling abroad for holidays, to visit relatives. How do they plan for a comprehensive travel insurance plan? Do they buy a entire package? Do they buy it individually? How does that work?
Yeah, so families should purchase it as a family. There are 2 kinds of policies that individuals can buy. One is a family policy, one is a group policy. So if you are blood related, you buy a family policy. And there are certain discounts there. So if you buy a family policy that usually has, say 4 people are buying a family policy, it will cost less than each individual buying one policy, right? Because of various reasons, but the cost is roughly, you'll get about a 30% kind of discount. But if you buy it as a group, you will buy 4 individual policies. So if you're not blood related, then you will buy 4 individual policies. So they can be group policies or they can be family policies. So you have to make sure that if you are traveling as a family, you opt for a family policy, not a group policy.
So what about domestic travel? Of course, there's a very fine line here because one ends up having health insurance, but a lot of say the flight companies are offering you, an added insurance cover. How does that work? And what are the advantages of that?
Yeah, so if I was a customer, I would not purchase it. It is a bit of an extra cost and it does not really benefit you much. And that is very clear if you look at the claims ratios of the insurance companies on a product. See, if you look at the claims ratio on health insurance, the claims ratio is about 70-80%. That means about 70-80% of the money that is paid by customers eventually gets back to the customer in the form of claims. If on the other hand you take domestic travel insurance and you look at the claims ratios, they'll be sub 10%. That means not much claim is paid on those. So that means it's not a very good policy. I think one of the best ways to test whether a policy is consumer friendly or not is to look at the claims ratio. That how much of the money that's being collected is being paid out in claims. And I think anything less than 60% will start getting unhealthy for the consumers. So, while the insurance companies will not like me saying this, I would say travel insurance, domestic travel insurance is definitely not something I would advise.
Well, you've got to be blunt sometimes. All right. So that's all the time that we have in this part of the show. But of course, we're going to be taking your questions after the break. Yeah, who's going to be taking your questions? We've got Surya Kumari, who's 60 years old, and she asks, I need to take travel insurance before I apply for a Schengen visa. I'm a cardiac and a diabetic patient. Please suggest what kind of a policy I should opt for. Yashish.
You should go for a travel insurance policy of about $2 lakh. If you can, you should be able to get it. And you should attempt to get pre-existing diseases included in the policy. I would say about 60% of the companies out there should be able to offer you that. So you just have to, go somewhere on the internet and kind of check out all the prices and all the options that you have. There are a good 15-20 companies offering travel insurance, and I think you can just pick out what's best for you.
So that comparative is pretty easy to do now.
It's pretty straightforward, and usually you will get your policy within 5 minutes on your phone or your email. Sometimes it gets delayed, but that'll be about 24 hours at worst.
Right. Well, we've got Anuj Arora, and he asks, does travel insurance cover all medical expenses if a person meets with an accident outside India? My brother recently went to Bermuda and met with an accident while riding a bike. However, his claim was rejected by the insurer. Is it possible for the insurer to reject such claims? Is there any policy that covers such uncertainty? And also, what kind of options does the brother have in that sense?
It'll be so. See, I would not want to comment without looking at the details of this particular policy.
Precisely.
Accidents are covered. Accidents are definitely covered. Now, maybe, I don't know what the brother was doing. Was he racing? Was, was he...
Coming back from a party? We don't know.
I don't know what the details of this are and why it has been rejected. Or is it that the person was outside of the location for which they are covered? Because many of these travel insurance policies, and that's why I mentioned in the first go, you have to be very clear about what all places you're going to visit. Because if I buy a travel insurance policy, not including Japan, and I have an accident in Japan, then I'm not going to be covered in Japan. I could buy an Asia policy. I could be going to Hong Kong, Singapore, everywhere on that. But Japan, you have to declare separately. And if you have not declared Japan, then you would not be covered. So I don't know if the policy they purchased, if Bermuda was covered and which continent, etc. So there can be lots of reasons, but yes, otherwise accidents are definitely covered. So if I have a Schengen visa and I have an accident in Schengen, I will definitely be covered under travel insurance, no doubt about that.
Right, we've got Rashmi and she says, I'm part of the cabin crew and recently bought a term plan for myself. I got to know that this policy does not cover people in high-risk professions such as aviation. Is this true? And what do I do with my policy if it does not cover a high-risk profession such as hers?
Yeah, so you have to declare the higher risk at the time of purchase. If you have not, so whether it's military, paramilitary, aviation, firefighting, lots of professions, you must declare them before you purchase your policy. If you have declared them and the company has given you your policy, then well, you're covered. If you have not declared them and you have bought the policy, then the assumption is, I'm not saying this is what happened, but the assumption is that you knew that you are not eligible for the policy and you hid this information and you purchased the policy withholding this information, and hence it's not in the best principles of insurance which say that you have to have the best intentions. So that's basically the problem. So I would suggest usually when you purchase these policies, please make sure you fill out the form yourself. They do ask for profession. I do not believe any life insurance company offers a policy without asking you for profession. So, and if in that profession you have mentioned your profession and you've still got the policy, then you're covered.
Right, we've got Saurabh and he says, I'm 58 years old, my wife is 57. Please suggest a health insurance plan that my wife and I should consider. What should be the minimum sum insured that we should opt for? And both of us have high cholesterol.
Well, if you have high cholesterol, you will have to undergo medicals anyway at 57, 58. Your choice is whether to take a floater policy for both of you or to take individual policies for each one of you. While the individual policy today might come out to be a little more expensive than the floater policy, I would still advise it. Because see, when you buy a health insurance policy, you don't buy it for 1 year. And this is very important. Health insurance is the longest policy you're ever going to buy. It's much longer than any life insurance policy. While it's just a 1-year contract, every year the contract is being renewed and it's compulsorily renewed by the insurance company. It's your prerogative to cancel the contract, right? So it's a policy you're buying. If you're going to live till 90, it's a policy you're buying for the next 32 years. So if any of you has a disease, then your policy will start going different ways. And hence it makes sense for you. Anybody beyond 50 purchasing policy, I would usually advise the couple to have separate policies, even though it may cost 20% extra right now. Now you asked in terms of coverage. I would suggest a minimum of about 6 lakh rupees. And if you can get critical illness, although knowing your medical condition, maybe you cannot get it any longer. But if you can get critical illness, then try to purchase a 10 lakh rupee critical illness. There's one more mechanism you could do this. So there's a life insurance policy by ICICI Prudential where critical illness is covered now. And you can buy a 30-year critical illness in that. So if you attempt that, maybe you could purchase a policy. Up to 75 years at least, you can buy the life cover and get the critical illness along with that. And it's a significant critical illness cover that you can purchase along with that. So that's another way to get critical illness.
Right, Ashish, thanks a lot. That's all the time that we have on this episode of Policy Bazaar. But last week we asked you a question, what does home insurance policy cover? And the answer is C, that is both structure and content. And Shweta Gupta is the winner. Congratulations. This week's question is domestic travel insurance mandatory in India? You can write in your answers to queries at policybazaar.com. Goodbye, and we'll see you with another episode of Policy Bazaar. Bye-bye.